This is 11 minutes past 5 on the Melting Pot on www.cityradio.co.za, and we continue with the Melting Pot. In the background, as usual, we have El Clue with his track titled Big Turtle River. It's a beautiful track, Pastor Nech.
I'm going to download it.
It's a beautiful track. It's from the album Move. I remember I got this album when I was in university. I think it came out the year we voted, actually, 1994. That's when I started out at the University of Transkei, and it came out. Beautiful, beautiful album. I love this track. I love the other track that's on the album that is On the Sands. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Today, the other track on it, On the Sands, and that's it in the background. Beautiful stuff. For those who like it, who wonder, what is that thing playing in the background? El Clue, the Big Turtle River. Today we continue with our conversation, rebuilding, because we spoke about things that people can do to tear down relationships. And last week we started out with first two. We're going to recap them and then continue with the remaining 7. Pastor Nech, welcome to the Melting Pot today.
Thank you very much, Pastor Lupondwana.
Okay, take us through it. Let's first deal with the first 2 that we did last week.
I think what we dealt with last week, we were looking at the antidote of using financial power to fight the recessive party.
Yes.
And we actually were saying that the antidote for that is that as much as we know that money answers everything, money is not everything, or everything is not money. And there is still a lot of life outside money.
Sure.
And this is where we actually need to build much, because I might use it as a weapon today, this money, and tomorrow it is
you don't have
a depleted weapon. It is not there anymore.
Yeah.
And the one whom I was trying to be so much suppressive over,
it may be his 10 or her 10 now to
yes,
have the money.
It might become the 10 of that other one exactly to have the money. And what do I do with the manual book which I have written for how to use money in relationship?
I remember you said you must remember that the manual you wrote on how to handle a relationship when you have money will be used when you don't have money.
Exactly. So it might become the payback time.
So it's important for you to write a manual you will be able to live under when it's your turn not to have money.
Yes.
All right.
And then the second antidote that we looked on, which is an antidote for destruction of legacy, where you burn even to ashes your spouse's legacy, so that your spouse is never remembered anymore.
You've destroyed the relationship.
Destroy the relationship, and you continue to destroy it even if you have been blessed with children. You also continue on to make an onslaught of the other spouse on the kids, so that you extricate it. And I think we had a very nice parable or illustration last week of this man called Ananias.
Yes.
Yes, that even if you think there is nothing good that you can speak about your spouse to your kids, do remember that good stories and good narratives about their parents, the other parent,
yes,
is what their ego, what their identities feed on.
Yes.
And for them to be emotionally balanced, they need always to be told those stories.
Good stories from both sides.
From both sides.
You said something very interesting last week. You spoke about how when you destroy the mother in the eyes of the child, whether it's financially or otherwise, you are destroying the child, because the mother is a home. The mother is an institution in and of herself. And so you're messing up your own child by trying to destroy the mother. And I thought it was very interesting.
And we are going to come back and cover a bit of that very same
Let's go.
Concept.
So that's what we did last week.
Yes.
Let's continue.
Now, on the transgenerational destruction,
yes,
weapon that we use when we're actually angry, and it is drawn from the imagery of Amos chapter 1 verse 3, where these people, the Edomites, went on to rip off women with child, in other words, pregnant women, so that not only were they destroying the mothers at that time, but they were also destroying
The next generation.
the unborn generations, up to the third and fourth generation, as the Bible will put it. So I think what we need to remember is that, as an antidote, that the best way of loving your kids, no matter how much you have fought, something like a Gulf War. Gulf War is nothing compared to the Second World War and the First World War. It was quite fierce. No matter how hard and long you have fought each other, you must always remember that in marriage and even outside marriage, the best way of loving your kids is to love their other parents.
Now that's a difficult one. I'll tell you why. Because some other parents are almost impossible to get along with. One. Number two, the things they may have said and done to you may be so hurtful. And sometimes they may not even have acknowledged that they've done it. Sometimes they don't even care. They're indifferent to the pain that they have caused, and sometimes are continuing to cause. And you are saying the best way to love your kids is to love the other parent.
Yes. If I'm a man, or if you're a man, the best way of loving your kids is to love their mother as well. Even after divorce, when the relationship between the two of you has so-called
changed status.
Yes, changed status, and it cannot be salvaged. Even beyond that, you still need to reach out and love somehow, one way or be humane to the other parent as well.
And by love, you're not meaning anything romantic. You just talk about acts of kindness and generosity.
Yes.
And speaking to them well.
Exactly.
And about them well.
Exactly. Right. Sometimes they really land into some troubles. You hear that they have been living on loan sharks,
yes.
Or from the loan sharks' revenue. And it comes to your attention, and it is within your power and your capacity to even redeem them from those kind of sharks. When you do deliver them from that, you are also doing a good job for your kids.
All right. So the way we should think about the other parent is not just that they've messed me up in our relationship. Now that the relationship may be over, you must start thinking about how do I create an environment for my child or for my children that is going to be healthy, and that may include providing support to the parent.
Exactly.
So running away with child support doesn't really help your child.
It doesn't.
It's a foolish way of fighting.
It doesn't. And this is when we decide to commodify kids, children. And children are not a commodity. They are part of ourselves. They're an extension of our personal identities. They carry our genetic code in them. So they are our other selves. And, in statistics, we talk about replacing yourself when you procreate, or when you father, or when you mother a child. So these are also, although they are independent and individuals in their own right, but they also perpetuate ourselves as well.
I'm wondering the impact, because sometimes in our relationships we deal with people who were products of this transgenerational destruction, where you marry someone whose parents fought that generation and messed up the next generation that you are married to now. And the relationship may be difficult because of that. And sometimes we might be tempted to fight without considering the fact that the person you are dealing with is a victim of transgenerational destruction. And we may not even consider that the way we are fighting here, we are merely perpetuating that. It moves from one. We are extending it to the third and fourth generation.
And somewhere, somehow, that cycle has to be broken. And we will not actually break it by being strong against each other and be retaliative in dealing with each other. It's only probably love that can only conquer all. And when we talk about this, I know you may actually be having a very, very difficult partner sometime that you may not see eye to eye with on many things. So, but we are also saying, as much as you may not be able to control the behavior of the other one, you can take charge of your own stimuli to how they act and how they react to you.
Okay.
And the best stimulus, that package that we can offer, is love.
I hear you saying that especially when you know that your spouse may have been a product of a difficult family where people fought in ways that affected the next generation, that your love for your children may include the kind of love for your spouse that allows this relationship to be great for your children, so that that cycle ends with your generation. It does not extend to your children.
Exactly. And it's not a very small thing, and this is where you actually begin to realize that in dealing with each other, elements of forgiveness will also have to come in. And when we talk about forgiveness here, we are not talking about forgiving one single bad act, but also forgiving a reputation, forgiving an attitude whose formation has taken so many years and many intergenerational continuation of bad things and bad elements. So you forgive that kind of an attitude, that kind of a lifestyle, you forgive it. In other words, you decide to give it a better feedback by loving regardless. I think and I hope that if we were dealing with probably the concept of loving itself outside this one, which is going to become a subject on its own, we will be able to delve a little bit much more deeper.
Okay.
But we are saying that regardless of who you married, maybe without even proper understanding of who you were marrying, given that the person is a product of many generations that have rolled out down to the present one, the best is still to be very civil to each other, to be civil to that one, more especially when children are also involved. Loving that particular person, regardless, you are doing yourself a great favor in loving your kids. We must always remember that we can become ex-spouses, ex-husband and ex-wife, but with the children, there's nothing like an ex-mother and an ex-father.
And an ex-father.
Yeah.
All right.
My ex-wife is still their current mother.
Yes.
So whatever I do and however I deal with my ex-wife also affects my current mother, the current mother of my children at the moment.
So if we were to come up with a hashtag for this point, we would say, don't pass the conflict to the next generation.
Exactly. Let it end here.
Let's take a break. We'll be back after this. 26 minutes past 5 on City Radio, on www.cityradio.co.za. We continue with rebuilding. We've just, before our break, spoken about how the fights that we have, let's keep them in our generation. If there's anything we should not pass on, it's these conflicts. If you're fighting with your spouse, keep it between the two of you. Don't involve the kids, because you're messing up the next generation. Where do we go from there?
Thank you. Then there is another thing that we looked on, one of those things that we should not engage in, or those weapons that we should not pick up. And one of those is rage in conflict. And this is drawn from Amos chapter 1 verse 11, where we are told that Edom's anger against his brother burned perpetually and forever. So you do have those kind of families where the kind of anger that they have had, or which they have because of whatever could have triggered that thing, it never ends. It becomes a perpetual anger that burns everything in the house and burns everything in the family. So it runs for months and it runs for years. When something happens 5 years down the line, you will be reminded of what happened 5 years ago and stuff like that. Now,
is this the one you mentioned that sometimes we even invest in reminders?
We invest on reminders. We put up a powerful almanac and we have a whole artifacts and reminders, memorabilia of all the hurts and the wrongs that we have suffered in the relationship.
And you keep on going back.
Keep on going
Pick
back.
up one.
keep up one to last us the whole year or the whole month. And then it just fuels our anger perpetually.
I understand that sometimes something may be had, and I think one of the problems we have or challenges we have is that we don't always seek professional help when we are struggling to move on from a particular hurt. It's sometimes we have been hurt by something that someone has done, and we think that we'll be able to move on, and we are struggling to do so. We don't always seek help. Instead, we resurrect it ever so often, and then it can last. Then you can have this anger you're talking about, this rage that burns from 1 month to another, from 1 year to another.
And we are also told that the nice thing about anger, that anger is a choice. And it's also an attitude. And the Bible tries to address that. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, it says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. You know, so you need to, it recognizes the fact that you can get angry.
Yes.
But it also talks against its perpetuation beyond a day frame. Let it not go beyond a day. In other words, if there is anything that you have to sort out, let it be sorted out today. And this was drawn from an Old Testament imagery.
Okay.
If one could just take just a split of a minute on it.
All right.
You know, in the Hebrew life, there was no business, no life would start before a morning sacrifice.
Yes.
And the sacrifice was understood to be a representative of Christ, that lamb that will be slaughtering.
The Messiah that they were waiting for.
The Messiah that we were waiting for. But it was also a very powerful symbolism of how sin is forgiven. It's never written off. I mean, it's never kept swept under the carpet. Somebody pays the price for that.
Yes.
And that is Christ. And then a Hebrew's day will never end without another evening sacrifice.
Yes.
So in between these sacrifices, get angry.
Yes.
But when you are on your way to go and offer the evening sacrifice, and you remember that you are still angry.
That's what Jesus says.
Jesus says, go back, sort that thing out.
And then come and continue.
And do remember that the evening sacrifice shall not be extended. So do everything you can do within that time frame so that you don't burn with the anger which has been forgiven somewhere there, for which a sacrifice has been offered that very same evening, beyond that sacrifice. So, and I think this is exactly where Paul was coming from when he says, don't let it...
The sun set on your anger.
So, yes, it must not set on your anger.
I'm curious to think that whenever we think of the sacrifice or the morning and evening sacrifice then, or the sacrifices that were offered for worship, we associate that with worship. And yet when we come to God in prayer as a family in the evening, we may not associate it with that evening sacrifice, such that we can have our fight and anger that lasts through a number of days. We can pray in the morning, continue with our anger, pray in the evening, even go to church on the weekend and continue with the anger. And yet there seems to have been an injunction that you sort that out and then come and make peace with the Lord, because you've already made peace with the people you live with.
That's exactly. And this is where it hits even much more closer home. You know, we venerate this beautiful cathedral with classical architectural designs and stuff like that, and spending a lot of monies on them. And we call them churches and houses of worship, or churches, you know. But when you look at it from this perspective, there is no church greater than the family church.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you cannot do this forgiving every morning and do the forgiving every evening and sort out your anger within these time frames, then you are not having, you know, a saving church.
Now, I suppose for anyone who's listening, it would be important for them to realize that this is going to be good for your relationship. It's good for your relationship. It's good for the relationship you're having. It's good for the kids that are involved with their kids in the relationship. For you to be angry when there's cause for you to be angry. But make sure that anger does not last, because the longer the anger lasts, the more damage it does to the relationship, both for you and your spouse, and even for the next generation.
Exactly. You know, and we are actually told from psychology, you know, from psychology, they will actually tell you that if a trauma has happened to you and is not attended to within 72 hours at the most, the mind then develops some destructive ways of dealing with that situation. Okay. And I think this is exactly what also God had in mind, knowing the way our brains are wired. Wow. That when something has happened that has messed you up so much, make sure that it is sorted out
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible, lest it becomes something like a permanent fixture of dealing with issues and very destructive in that, for that matter, in your life. So it can become very toxic to the relationship to keep on having anger brought forward. You know, in accounting,
it's balance brought forward. This is anger brought forward.
Anger brought forward. So you must never have in a relationship
anger brought forward.
Anger brought forward.
At 26 minutes to 6, we'll take a break and come back just after this. Yes, but we continue our conversation about trying to rebuild the walls of relationships. Let's go on to the next one.
Okay, maybe just as we sign off from this one on rage, perpetual rage and anger. Sometimes it could be that I get so much angry and I'm so much enraged, and my spouse reads that this anger might actually lead to sin. It can be very much destructive. Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman who is engaged or observing. If my spouse at that time then decides that, you know what, to save the situation here, because it has become highly volatile, it's better for me to run away.
Yes.
You know. So in the Old Testament, the Bible made provisions, I think, of 6 cities this other side of the river. And
the cities of refuge.
Called the cities of refuge.
Yes.
You know, so we need to designate those cities of refuge within our marriages.
Okay.
That if my wife runs away because of my rage to her home, that is a city of refuge.
Yes.
If she goes to my parents, that is also, and stuff like that. And that once people have ran to those kind of designated places, I will not follow them. They are helping me to cool down and to deal with my anger better, so that I don't sin and I'm able to cut it short within a day.
But shouldn't that have some form of mechanism? Because if she leaves and I don't go after her, probably even after a week or so, it might appear that I don't care about the relationship. Shouldn't there be like a caveat? Let me fight and I appear to be extremely angry, and she's like, yo, this one's gonna kill me, and she packs up and leaves. If I just let her be, does it not also run the risk of communicating a message that I don't care, you might as well stay where you are?
Well, it will also very much depend on the premarital counseling that the people got, or any continuous coaching in dealing with conflicts within the marriage.
All right.
And I think in my short experience, whenever we handle this subject, particularly premarital, we try to cover all those kind of mechanisms, so that you anticipate, you contemplate them to the point that when they happen, they just become mechanical. But of course, if you haven't gone through that kind of,
I was going to ask, what about those
training, then it can become a little bit of a challenge. However, traditionally, in most cultures, they will actually allow for that if she has run, or if he has run here to this particular place, that is the right place to be.
Yes, and if you're going to go there, you're going there for peace.
It already imposes a particular protocol.
Yes.
That has to be observed and to be followed. Right. But we may not have much space for now, but I think suffice to say, it's good for each of the families to always have
a city of refuge,
one way or another.
All right, that's good.
In the other one that we spoke about, which could be very much toxic, is the weapon of conniving with your spouse enemy. And we are saying that the antidote for that is that should be a non-starter. We should never, never, ever think of handing over our own spouses to their worst enemies. You know, whether it is at workplace or within the community or within whatever, within the society there or within the family. Because if you hand over your spouse to her worst or to his worst enemy, just for discipline, sometimes it's just only for discipline, you need to know that your enemy will always opt for a mortal combat if or when given the opportunity to do so. So you may say, no, I just want you to clap him a little bit using your obvious relationship with this person. And then the person opts to kill.
Yes.
And then you come back crying and say, I didn't mean that you should kill him. I just meant that you must just scare him a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And I see this sometimes with people who are hurt deeply, and they decide to disclose information that was shared with them in confidence. Something that maybe your spouse may have done wrongly that is relating to work or something like that, and you decide, let me go and report him. Let me go and report him at work that this is what he does or this is what she does, because we are fighting this battle. And there, they don't just reprimand, they fire.
And then they fire him, he or she comes and sits home, and they come and repossess the very same car that you have,
Yes.
which has been financed by the very work. And then you realize that this is not
what you meant.
This is not what I meant.
But you have no control over what the enemy does.
You have no control over what the enemy does, and that's why you should never ever look at it as an option to hand over your spouse to the spouse's worst enemy.
Now let's talk for a minute, and then we can move on about those instances where you may have already done it, and now you are realizing that you shouldn't have, and you are saying, how can I make things right? How can I rebuild going forward?
Yeah, I think this is where we talk about PR damage control.
Yes.
You know, public relations damage control. It's either you may have to go back again to the same people, if that it will take you to swallow your humble pie and go back to the very same people to undo what you have done in the best way you know how. Because it's not only him that you are handing over there, but it's the entire family. Your enemies may also use it as a leverage, even to control you as well.
True.
You know.
Yeah.
So if you have already done it, maybe the sun should never set on you without you having undone that thing.
Okay.
You will need to be restless until you find a permanent solution to that.
And I think that people may need to accept that the relationship they had before this has changed, because the trust issues may be there, they may be serious. And so it may not be the way it was before, but you have an opportunity of building a new relationship that does not start on a full complement of 100% trust. That probably starts at 10%, that with time the trust will grow again.
And it grows.
And it will grow in time. He says, don't expect it to be what it was before you hand him or her over to their enemy.
It will grow like an investment.
Yes.
So it will take time.
It will.
Yes. But it's one of those don't do's. And if you have done it, this is what you probably may need to do. We also looked at the other issue of displacement from home ground, sending the other party into exile, you know, during relationship and even after relationship sometimes. So, and we are saying that beyond sending each other on exiles or into exiles, we also need to remember that to displace, more especially kids here, are the ones who come very handy to become victims of this particular weapon of yours, you know. When you send kids into exile, sometimes we displaces them from their home by not chasing them out of the house, but chasing away the other party to whom who holds 50% of who they are,
Yes.
you know. So once the other one has gone out into exile, they are partially here. They have actually become displaced while still in the house, but from their own home. And we need to know that we can dispose of our houses even during divorce settlement, but a home cannot be sold, and you can not also replace a home. You can only be displaced from it once you have been thrown out of it.
So you can't say I'm going to buy a new home.
You can't buy a new home.
Yeah, you can buy a new house.
You can buy a new house.
Yeah.
Because even if you buy a new house, but you have gone separate ways, children may still remain homeless.
Yes, in the new house.
In the new house.
All right. We'll have to talk about home some other time. We spoke about it a bit last time.
Yes, and so we are having a lot of homeless children who live in mansions.
Yes.
Because of displacement from the marriage.
They don't feel like they belong, like this is home.
Yes.
This is where they are comfortable. This is where they are loved. And this is where they can run to when things go wrong.
They are torn.
And you know, sometimes we've been shocked at why we have given our children everything, and yet they find home with gangs. They find home with people they do drugs with. They find home amongst criminals. Like, but why? They feel they belong over there, and they may not have a home and yet live in a mansion.
That's very true.
Yep. All right.
You dig deeper into it, you will find that it goes into the family dynamics and the relationship dynamics. And then we may also look at this other weapon of mass destruction, which is use of terminal weapons in the relationship. Now, when you use a terminal weapon against the other spouse, this is the kind of a weapon from which your spouse may never recover.
Be able to recover.
You know,
yeah.
It's either you badmouth the spouse to your parents, and you tell them how unfaithful your spouse is and stuff like that. And even when you have recovered yourself,
denies your family. Remember that this one hurt you a lot.
Yes,
and that's how we see them.
And you may also never forget how you were actually sold out to the other spouse parents and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and a very simple equation here is that, you know, when you use a weapon of mass, a weapon, a terminal weapon that destroys the other one permanently, from which the other one may never recover, you are basically, sometimes the other day you look back at what you have done, you realize that you simply applied a permanent solution on a temporary problem.
Yes.
And it's irreversible.
Yes.
It's gone.
Let's spend a minute just trying to create a balance. The balance between having friends and being able to run home for help when things go wrong. What's the balance between going home for help and support and using your home as a terminal weapon against your spouse? Because it's true that sometimes when you are hurt, you share it with your brother, you share it with your sister, you share it with your parents. What limit, where do we draw the line between just a question of sharing to get support and actually destroying the other one?
You know, it depends on the attitude of myself here, who is an angry person, running there to my family and stuff like that. And also, it will also depend on the maturity level or the exposure, the attitude that my family on the other side has about the whole thing, you know. So I remember a friend of mine will tell me that whenever he or she will be angry with the spouse here, then she or him will run back home and go and tell the mother, this man has messed me up, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and all stuff like that. And then this mother, the way she was so mature, she will just listen to the daughter and then cook nice meal. They have the nice meal, and then come sunset, and then she says, you know what? here at my home, we have numbered bedrooms. Our blankets are also numbered. You know, I have helped you. You have
unburdened yourself. You have offloaded your sorrows.
So
go home.
It's about time now for you to go home. So go home. You know, and that way, this parent was very much conscious that their home here is not a place where people come and get ammunition, but this is a place where people come and get distressed, relieved,
and go back.
Of
course, next time when we talk about issues of abuse, it does not mean that someone should stay in a situation that could kill them because the parents will say go back. It's just that to say when you do go to family, it is not to bring an end to the relationship.
Of course, this particular parent would have measured that, you know, this is a non-fatal kind of conflict. It's an anger. That
will just end.
Yes, probably, yeah, stuff like that.
All right. Well, that's it for today. 4 minutes to 6. Thank you very much, Pastor Netch. That was the melting pot, and I think we're gonna round up with Osborn Motlhabane.
No, we're back next week.
Same time.
Same time.
Yes.
On the melting pot, 5 to 6.
Yes.
We'll continue on Relationships 101.
101. Relationships 101.
Yes. And then we just put it on Facebook. What we're going to cover next week. Yes. From our Facebook friends.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Till we meet again next week.
And for those on www.cityradio.co.za, until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.